to have a precise formula for leadership. Um, so yeah, I think it's a learning process. I'm definitely still learning a lot about leadership every year, um, but I'm happy to pass on what I've learned so far. So a little bit about myself. Switch on to the next slide. So here you can see a brief profile of me. I graduated from University High School in Irvine back in 2015, and then I went to UC Berkeley to study history and political science. I graduated in 2019, right before the pandemic hit. So fortunately, the job market for my group was a lot better than the group that came after. I went on to study at Harvard Law School, where I am basically exactly halfway through my journey of becoming a lawyer. We'll see if the world needs more lawyers when I graduate. And I was born in Beijing, and I moved to the US, to LA, when I was 8 years old. So the first story I have for you guys today is one of self-discovery. I think leadership can kind of be boiled down to three components. One is, how do you become a leader, right? How do you find something that you're passionate about, that you can call your calling, and that other people might look to you for leadership on? The second question is, how do you get people to follow along? How do you get people to be motivated in pursuing that same mission and to help you in that leadership journey? And then the last question is, once you have that team and once you have that drive, how do you make the right decisions? How do you be a good leader? So each of my stories will cover one of those questions. And the first one is, how do you become a leader in the first place? Now, when I was in college, I was in an organization called Delta Phi Epsilon. It was a professional foreign service fraternity. And I joined that organization as a freshman. It's an organization that I really loved. Someone who had graduated already by the time I joined just kept on coming up. His name was Kevin Patumwat, and he had been a senior the year before I joined D-Phi. So he was gone by the time I got there. And Kevin went to Harvard Law School. He graduated from Berkeley and then went straight into law school. And a lot of people still really looked up to him and really respected him. People had really come to like him when he was in the community. And people also saw a lot of similarities between Kevin and I. They said that, are you related to Kevin? Because he's also Asian American. And I said, Kevin was always very optimistic. He was very outgoing. And those are two of the traits that I think really defines me. So people compared me to him all the time. And 4 years later, I had applied to law school. I had gotten accepted to Harvard Law School. And so when I went to visit, I met up with Kevin, who was finishing up his time in law school. And I asked him, well, how was your law school experience? How did you like it? And he really hated it. He was really miserable. In fact, he said he was depressed for almost the majority of his time in law school. And he actually dropped out for a year to take a gap year, just so he had time to heal before he went back to law school. And that really scared me, because this person, Kevin, he was someone that everybody in my organization respected, really looked up to. And he was someone that people thought were really similar to me. And so if he was depressed and he had a terrible time in law school, maybe I would too. So I asked him more. I asked him why he felt like he didn't have such a good time. And he told me something I'll never forget. He said, law school actually is really a miserable time for a lot of people, especially somewhere when you go to law school somewhere like Harvard, because it's a process that's meant to teach you to think in a new way, right? To think like a lawyer. And in doing that, the law school tries to take away everything you had before so you can learn in that new way, right? So it's amazing how similar law school is to middle school. You get assigned lockers, you take all the same classes with the same people, You get assigned seating. It's all meant to kind of chip away at your sense of identity. And at the same time, you're surrounded by a lot of really ambitious people who have a lot of really great experiences, who seem to really know what they're doing. And so studying law school can be really challenging for everyone involved. You come into it as an overachiever who had done really well in college or in the workforce. Once you start law school, now you're surrounded always by people who have done really well. You come into law school prepared, or you think you're prepared to be the best, to be number one, because typically a lot of people who go to Harvard were before coming. And once you're there, you find out that you're just average. And so it's a process that takes away a lot from people. The people that I found to be happy in law school are the people who know themselves. And what I mean is they know who they are and they know what they want. They know their values. They know what makes them happy. They know what takes energy away from them. And they're confident enough to follow that. There are things in law school that everyone thinks that you have to do when you're in law school. Everyone thinks you have to apply to law review. Everyone thinks you should try to clerk for a judge. Everyone thinks you need to take corporations and tax. But those are not the paths for me. And those are not the paths for a lot of people. I would hate to be on law review because I hate just reading and thinking about legal questions all day. I need to interact with people, and that's not something you do in law review. I would hate taking corporations and tax because I have no interest in corporations and tax. And I would also hate clerking for a judge because I think clerking for a judge, you're helping to uphold a legal system that I think does a lot of harm to people. And I would much rather advocate for people that I feel like I can help instead of to uphold a broken system. So if people who come into law school not knowing themselves will do all of these things that they think will make them happy, that they just do because everybody else is doing, but those things end up taking a lot of energy away from them, and they end up becoming miserable in law school, and they further lose their sense of self. And when you're doing something you don't like, you're not going to put in all of your effort. You're not going to do a good job. And so you get into this vicious cycle where the worse you do, the less you believe in yourself. The less you believe in yourself, the more you follow others and do what makes other people happy. And then the more you do that, the less well you do. And it feeds back into itself and just gets worse and worse. Now, I know not all of you are going to go to law school. Most of you probably think being a lawyer is incredibly boring, and some of you would be right. But I think this is a story that has a lot of broad implications for everyone here. To be a leader and to be someone that people will look up to, that people will want to follow, I think you really do need to know yourself. You need to be doing something that you love. You need to know what makes you happy and what doesn't make you happy. And you need to be confident enough to do the things that work for you and to say no to the things that don't work for you. And I think when you do that, you start becoming really involved. You start creating a lot of good change in whatever field you're really passionate about. And eventually people start looking up to you and they start thinking, wow, this is someone that's found their mission. This is someone that's doing great work. I would love to join them. I would love to help them with their mission. All right, so that was a story about leadership and a story specifically about how you become a leader. Now, let's talk about how you can make the right decisions when you are in a position of leadership. So I started an organization, as our host introduced, called the Asian Youth Liberty League. And it is a student-run 501c3 dedicated to educating young Asian Americans and developing leadership among young Asian Americans. We've seen since 2016 that there's been an increase in hateful language towards Asian Americans, with Trump accusing Chinese people of being spies and saying he intended to stop granting student visas, to the government labeling COVID-19 to be the China virus and people calling it Kung Flu, to this huge rise in violent attacks against Asian Americans all over the US. Unfortunately, this seems to be something that will only get worse with time, because as China continues to rise, people in the US will start to see China with more and more suspicion, and they will treat Chinese Americans and Asian Americans more as enemies instead of as Americans. And so Ally is focused on training the next generation of young Asian Americans to take the front lines in that fight for our civil liberties. So we don't get run over by hate crimes. We don't get trampled over the way Japanese Americans were during World War II. One of the things that I found to be really helpful in Ally was having a growth mentality. And I'll explain what that is again through a story. I think someone might be muted.
I think iPhone. Could you please mute yourself, please? Thank you so much.
Sorry. Thank you, Anna. So I started Ally first in Irvine, California, where we had our initial chapter. And I really enjoyed working on Ally. I really enjoy nonprofit work in general. In fact, when I sit down and work on Ally or work on a nonprofit for a while, I'll think about dropping out of school and just doing nonprofit work full time, which always pisses off my parents. Nonprofit work is incredibly exciting because you can be really creative and you don't have to follow that many rules, and you can contribute your specific talents and be really creative in fulfilling the needs of the organization and the needs of the community. It's a really fulfilling thing to do. And so I really loved working on Ally in Irvine, but I never thought it would be something that would expand to other cities. I thought it's just something that me and my team would do every summer in Irvine. We would train young Asian Americans, and then that's it. One summer, we had a board member who invited Willing Man, who is the sitting mayor of Temple City, to come in and speak. And Temple City is a city that's about an hour and a half away from Irvine. And if you ever made that drive from the San Gabriel Valley, which is where Temple City is in, down to Irvine, you'll know it's not a fun drive. The roads are not that good. They're pretty narrow. The landscape is pretty desolate and pretty deserted. And if you're stuck in LA traffic, you're going to be on the roads for a while. So our board member had arranged for William, the mayor, to drive from Temple City to come to Irvine. But about 2 weeks before the meeting, she went to China for the summer. And so I lost contact with her. So me and the rest of my board members, we assumed that the meeting was no longer happening. And so the morning that William was supposed to come in, we said, oh, there's not going to be a meeting, just everyone can stay home this week. But William didn't get the memo. So William made that drive down to Irvine and came down ready to speak. And he found that there was nobody there. The doors were locked. And I got the most angry email and phone call that I've ever gotten in my life. Imagine I was on a walk with my parents, walking through the park, and I see an email pop up, and it's from the mayor of Temple City. And it's a short email, but it had some very strong language. It said, as an organization that claims to train future leaders, future Asian American leaders, how you respond to this will show your true colors. And I was so stressed out from reading that. I didn't know how I was going to respond. I didn't know how I can turn this situation around. But I thought about it, and I thought, what's done is done. It's already happened. We've made a mistake. Now the only thing we can do is to try to grow from that and to try to turn this into an opportunity. So I call William back and I explained to him, first of all, what happened. Then I asked him if I could come up to Temple City and make that hour-and-a-half drive up to Temple City and apologize to him in person. And William told me, no, that's okay. Just a phone apology is perfectly fine. But I told him, Ally as an org has some values that I think he would really appreciate, and that he would really like to help. And so we ended up agreeing to meet up in Temple City. So that Monday I drove up, we ended up getting lunch, and we really got along. He had also gone to Berkeley about 10 years before I did, and just treated me with a lot of respect. And we talked about our time in college. We talked about roommates that we liked, roommates that we didn't like. And then I talked to him about Ally and how we started and what we're trying to do. And he really wanted to help. So he agreed to serve as our advisor for another chapter of Ally up in Temple City. And he also introduced me to Christy He, who is a current board member at Ally and who became the president of the second ever chapter of Ally in Temple City. So why did I tell this story? Partly it's to show that when you are a leader, things will go wrong all the time. And in fact, a lot of your job as a leader is to respond to those crises and to prepare for them ahead of time and to respond when they do happen. The other thing that I think is really important to keep in mind, and this is whether as a leader or just as a person, is to have a growth mentality. It's that when something bad happens, when there's a problem, don't see it as a failure. Don't see it as a sign that you're not enough. See it as an opportunity to do more, to grow. Here, we had something terrible happen. We had someone that I really looked up to, a young Asian American mayor who had agreed to come, and we made a terrible impression on him. But we didn't just collapse from that. We didn't get really stressed out. Well, we did I got really stressed out, but the org didn't. And we responded to that and was able to grow from that. And I think that's a really important mentality. I had a friend in college who did something really similar. She was working a desk job, and then COVID hit, and she lost her job, like very many people. And for a while, she was just staying at home with her parents. She didn't really know what to do. And then she thought, I've always wanted to be a businesswoman. Maybe I'll just use this as an opportunity to start my own business. And she did. She started her own website making business and communications/poster design, etc. And now her company has more than 10 full-time employees. And it's only been like a year and a half. So while a lot of people lost their jobs through COVID, she saw it as an opportunity to grow and an opportunity to follow her dreams. And now she's doing great because of it. Okay, and the last story I have for you guys is a story of team. It's how to motivate your team, how to push them to greater heights. And again, I have a story. So I've told you about how Ally started out as an organization with one chapter, and then it became one of two chapters. And then the summer after, Ally became an organization of 4 chapters. So it grew pretty quickly. And when it became an organization of 4 chapters, I found that things stopped working the way they used to. I told you, I used to really enjoy doing work for Ally. I used to really enjoy just pouring hours and hours into building this nonprofit that I love. And before we were 4 chapters, my leadership style was very hands-on. I did a lot of managing where, I wanted to supervise every email that went out. I wanted to get the details on every speaker. I wanted to talk to every sponsor that we had. Just everything that any of the board members did, I wanted it to go through me as well, just to make sure everything was going well. And when Ally was only 1 chapter, that style did work. When Ally was 2 chapters, that style stretched, but it didn't break. When Ally became 4 chapters, that style stopped working. I was spending maybe 4 or 5 hours doing work for Ally every day. And it was very repetitive work, reading emails and making sure other emails were going out and making sure our sponsors were being communicated to, etc. And I started really hating doing work for Ally. And that's something I've never felt before. I started dreading having to do work for Ally. I started wishing the summer was over so that I could do schoolwork instead of Ally. And that would be fine if my hard work meant that the whole organization could prosper, but that actually wasn't what happened because I was getting so overwhelmed, the work of the organization suffered as well. And when I forgot something, because I had 300 things on my plate, that thing didn't get done anymore. It just felt like everything had to be done through me or it wasn't going to get done at all. And halfway through the summer, I really looked at how it was going and I thought this isn't working. And I decided to take a total step back in terms of leadership, and just telling the board members that I was overwhelmed, that I wanted them to have more ownership over their own projects. And I took a step back. And that decision ended up working out really well for me and for the organization. The reason for that is because when I stepped back, my board members, all of these presidents of different chapters, vice presidents of different chapters, treasurers, communications directors, they all flourished. They all found a newfound sense of energy that they didn't have before. Because I was over managing, they didn't feel as motivated anymore. They didn't feel like they had ownership over their own projects. If something went really well, they thought the credit belonged to me because I had done all of the footwork to get there. And if something went poorly, they also didn't feel like any of the blame should fall on them. It should fall on me because I had done all of the footwork to get there. When we made that switch where now they had ownership over their own projects, then they became a lot more motivated, because if something went well, they got all the credit. If something went poorly, they got all the blame. And also now they had the creativity to do what they wanted, right? If one of our board positions is the internal vice president, and their job is to communicate with our members about upcoming meetings. And the way that I had always wanted people to do it is to send out these massive email chains. And when I took that step back, our individual IVPs got the chance to experiment, right? Some of them tried putting up posters in their schools. Some of them tried promoting through WeChat. Some of them tried doing an applications-based system for membership. All of those decisions worked out much better than when they were just being overly managed by me, because these board members, they felt like it was their project, and they could use their own individual resources for that project. So to take it out of LA and to put it into a more general context, I think one of the keys for leadership is motivating your team. And the best thing you can do to motivate your team is to inspire and not manage. You want to inspire your board members with their purpose, with the. Sorry,
Hey,
Anna.
Rachel, I think. Could you please mute yourself, please? Thank you. Sorry, Oliver, about that.
No, you're good. I'm almost done, I promise. Yeah, I think one of the most important things you can do to motivate your team is to give people that individual sense of responsibility, to give them ownership, to tell them where their work fits in, to inspire them, to show how their work contributes to the work of the entire organization, but not overly manage and to take away the creativity that they need to do a good job. So these are my 3 stories. Leadership is obviously very complicated, and these are just 3 small stories in a very large field. But I'm happy to take any questions you guys might have and hand it over back to Anna.
Thank you, Oliver. And that was so amazing. I'm so inspired after hearing your 3 stories. And as a business owner myself, I completely relate to you in so many aspects. I think that discovery, growth, and working with the team are some of the most difficult things in life, but they're also some of the most important ones. Thank you so much for sharing. I have so many questions, and I'm sure our audience does too. What do you think about a Q&A session?
Let's do it.
Okay, great. I'm going to share my slides right now with some questions. Just give me 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay, can you guys all see this? Great. Okay. Oh, So, our first question, many people fear public speaking. What is a way you suggest to cope with it?
Yeah, I really feel this question. Public speaking is really hard. When I was in college, I was a part of Model UN, and one day we did impromptu speeches in the front of the room, and I was picked that day, so I went up and I started speaking. It was only a 30-second speech, but I started speaking and then I got stuck in my head, and literally I just froze on the spot. I could not make any words come out. And so everybody just sat there and looked at me, and I just looked right back at them for 30 seconds. It's the most awkward experience ever. Um, but luckily, public speaking is something that you can get a lot better at. And yeah, not have any of the really bad experiences that I've had. I think there's some really important secrets to public speaking. The first one is you don't want to map out what you want to say word for word. That was the problem I had that day in Model UN, where I had memorized what I wanted to say because I wanted every word to be perfect. And then as soon as I stepped up and I saw 200 pairs of eyes staring back at me, I forgot everything that I had planned to say. So don't have a script that you memorize word for word. Just come in with some kind of ideas on what you want to cover, just very basic ideas. Number two, I think the most important advice is to tell stories, as you can see from my presentation, which was only stories. Stories are great because they work great for the audience and they also work great for you. Stories are great for the audience because they turn everything from being really abstract and not memorable to things that are easy to understand and very concrete. In fact, a lot of scientists have said that humans are evolved to think in terms of stories. We find stories to be the most persuasive, to be the easiest to understand. And stories are just incredibly engaging. They help people tune in and follow along a lot better, and they help people connect with you emotionally. For example, right, if I wanted to tell you that my mom is a great mom, I could say, yeah, my mom is a really good mom. She, et cetera, and just told you instead of showed you, and that wouldn't be very persuasive. You would say, okay, so Oliver thinks his mom is pretty good, but there's no proof. He's not showing me. He's only telling me. And what if I told you a story and I told you, my mom used to count to 100 with me every day when I brushed my teeth with my Darth Vader toothbrush. And then she would read a book to me as I fell asleep. That's just a two sentence long story, but suddenly you get a very visual image of me brushing my teeth with my Darth Vader toothbrush and my mom counting along with me. And it's just a lot more persuasive. So stories are great with the audience, but they're also great for you because they're a lot easier to remember. We have a lot easier time telling a story that we know than remembering some kind of really abstract, detailed speech word for word.
Thank you. And hint, take Oliver's advice because as you can see, he's an amazing public speaker. Okay, our second question is, when there's a disagreement in a project, what do you do?
Yeah, this is a good question. And I think it really depends on what your role is within the team. There's some very important advising the roles that I think a good team needs to have, right? There needs to be the advocate who says, this is what I think is the right thing to do, and just really fights for that. There needs to be people who are analysts who use their unique skills to try to share more information with the rest of the group. There needs to be people who are devil's advocate, who try to poke holes in what everybody else is thinking, just so every aspect of that decision is thought about critically. Sometimes you need what's called an echo within a group, because if the leader is young and not very confident and they're too easy to push around, sometimes as a team member, it's important to give that leader some kind of confidence boost. And I think as a leader, you also have a very unique role, because leaders have a lot of authority within the team. And typically when they say something, the team will find a lot of pressure to go along and to follow along. And part of what makes this so difficult is whether the team knows each other really well or don't know each other at all, it's really easy for the whole team to follow along without thinking too hard. When the team doesn't know each other too well and everybody's strangers, people are afraid to disagree with each other and they're afraid to speak up. So even though I know the rest of the group is heading in a decision or a direction that I think is terrible, I might just not speak up. And if the group really knows each other and they're all best friends, the group tends to stop thinking critically about things. And it tends to just trust what other group members say. If I'm in a team with my best friends and we were trying to make a decision, and one of my friends said, this is, I think, the best decision, I'm not going to think about it critically. I'm just going to say, okay, let's just go along with that. So as a leader, I think your job really is to make sure all aspects of a decision are thought about, to think critically, to prevent groupthink, and to facilitate the conversation.
I will take your advice on that. Thank you very much. Okay, our next question is, what was the hardest part about starting Ally?
I think starting Ally really wasn't that hard, because I think this goes back to the first story I told you guys, which is to find yourself and to know your own calling. Once I made the decision to start Ally, it felt like everything just fit together. I had a lot of help from my friends and from the community. We were able to find places to meet for free because there were organizations that wanted to believed in our mission and wanted to help out and let us use their venues. We had just dozens of volunteers who were contributing money and time. We had donors. We had willing men who helped us expand to another city, etc. It felt like everything just fell into place. And I think the reason for that was because this was a project that I was really passionate about, that and that the rest of my team was really passionate about and motivated by. And so people could see that, and people just wanted to offer their resources and to help us out in that mission. I think the hardest part in starting Ally is actually making that step and starting the organization. At first, I remember, along the way, I never thought things would go as easily. I didn't think we were going to get a lot of great speakers our first summer, but we did. I didn't think we were going to get a lot of people to participate, but we did. And I never thought Ally would expand to another city. And now we have chapters in 8 cities. But yeah, I think I had a mentor who told me something that was really memorable, which is everyone in the world has great ideas. And the people who are successful are the people who actually get them done, who does something with it, who takes it out of their head and makes it into reality. And for me, that was for sure the hardest part of Ally. I had all these ideas and I was really motivated, but taking that first step and making it into a tangible organization that met in a physical location was a hard step. And once I overcame that step, everything else just fell into place.
Got it. Thank you. I think our next question is about Ally 2. What work is Ally doing now? How can we join the cause?
Yeah, so we host 2 main types of events. The first is we'll invite in an elected official or a business leader to come in and speak about their journey, as well as one issue they most want to bring change towards. So as you might have guessed, the willing man was one of those speakers. He eventually did come back to speak. After a year, he came back and he spoke about his journey as a young Asian American in politics, and then an issue that he really wanted to bring change towards. And then we have everybody in the club get into these small discussion groups of maybe 5 to 10 people and share their opinions on that issue that the speaker brought up. We try to give everybody in the club a chance to stand up and speak in front of a group of other people. And it's a really neat experience. I mean, our first summer, for example, we had John Chiang, who was the California State Treasurer, come in. He spoke about his journey, and then he talked about why he thought it was more important to spend more money on education. And then during the second half, there was me, who was just out of high school, talking about my dumb thoughts on education with the state treasurer. So that's half of our meetings. And the other half is to work on important skills, our workshops. And so these would be um, things like public speaking or resume building or interviewing or thinking about what kind of career you want or college application tips, etc. And yeah, and we think the two work together really well. At all of our meetings, we try to have a interactive portion. So, with the speakers, it's to get into those discussion groups. And then with the workshops, it's to give everyone a chance to practice what's being taught in the workshop. In terms of how people can join, you're welcome to visit our website at allyassemble.com. I'll send that into the chat. And we mainly meet over the summer. So just tune back in to the website maybe this May, and we should have more info about how to join for the summer of 2022. 2022? Yeah, summer of 2022 on our website then.
Great, thank you. And that's so impressive that Ally has been going on successfully for more than 6 years, I think. Our next question is actually relating to kind of something I think Ally addresses. What do you think about the impact Trump has made on Chinese Americans since COVID-19, and what has Ally done about it?
Yeah, well, I try not to get too political, but now I have an excuse, and Anna dragged me or opened the door for me. I am not a fan of Trump. And if you are a fan of Trump, that's okay. I don't have a problem with you. In fact, 2 of my best friends in law school voted for Trump. I do think, though, that Trump has been terrible towards Chinese Americans. My disagreements with that man is not over policy, although I do disagree with him on all sorts of policy. I think policy, that's okay. It's okay to disagree on policy. I have friends who don't agree with me on policy, and we have great debates on economics or religion or civil liberties. That's all okay. Mitt Romney is someone who I disagree with on policy. Trump is someone that I feel like disagrees with people, and I disagree with him on morality. He is someone who used the Chinese American community for his own personal gain. He saw COVID coming, and he knew it was going to damage the economy. He didn't want to lose re-election, and so he tried to blame Chinese Americans for that, labeling it Kung Flu and the China virus, and just trying to shift attention away from his own horrible handling of the virus. And that had horrible impacts for our community. We all saw those terrible videos of older Chinese Americans, our elders, getting beat up on streets and being told to go back to China. Or, I even had a racist interaction where I got into an elevator at the Harvard University Hospital. I got into the elevator, and this nurse got on the elevator as well. She looked at me, and she said, I can't remember she said something like, "Oh, like, you're not from China, right?" And I could only tell her, well, I'm Chinese, but I haven't gone back to China in a few years. And that was horrible for me to experience, because this was my hospital, and I think I deserve to be able to trust my healthcare professionals, and I deserve their respect. And I felt like I really didn't have that day. Anyways, sorry, that was a tangent. But yeah, I think Trump has done a lot of violence to our democracy, and I think he's done a lot of violence on the Chinese American community all for his own personal gain, not because he has fundamental disagreements on policy. I think he's a man that doesn't care about the country. He only cares about his own personal gain, and he's willing to do whatever and say anything to get that, and to harm whoever in order to put himself into a better position. What has Ally done about it? Sorry, that was in the second line. Ally has done nothing against Trump, because we are a 501c3. We are a nonprofit, which by definition is nonpartisan. And so I am very anti-Trump, but I don't let that get into my work. We invite Republicans, we invite Democrats. In fact, our board members are the ones, the student board members are the ones who send out the invitations. I never tell them, this person is someone that we shouldn't reach out to. If they feel like it's someone whose voice is important for the community, then that's someone that we'll invite, and that's someone that might come in and speak. And we've had plenty of Republicans and Democrats come in. In terms of the violence against Chinese Americans, we have done a lot. We raised over $3,000 back in 2019 to donate to organizations that help Asian Americans during that huge spike in hate crimes. We also register voters at all of our meetings. We have voter registration forms for people to fill out. But yeah, I'm always looking for ideas to do more. So if Anna, if you have any ideas, or anyone in the audience, I would love to hear it.
Great. It's so great to hear about the impact that Ally has made. And I'm sure a lot of people are very grateful for all the donations and the impact. So our next question is, in your opinion, what are the most important qualities of a leader and why?
Yeah, I think I don't want to repeat too much, because I think my stories covered a lot of this, but I do think leaders, they have to know themselves well, and to not get swayed into following something that isn't good for them or for their organization. I think leaders need to be incredible at reading people and knowing what motivates people. Some of the best tips for that is letting people have creativity over their own projects, to inspire but not manage, to show people where their work fits in within the organization. And then I think leaders have a growth mentality to be able to turn failures and setbacks into opportunity.
Thank you. And speaking about leadership, have you always been a natural leader?
No, I don't think there is a natural leader. And I wouldn't want to paint myself as a very good leader. I think leadership is something that's very complex, and it's something that I'm still learning. And I think there's different domains where different types of leaders are needed. I think I've been a good leader for Ally, but I think there's plenty of situations where if I were put into those leadership positions, I wouldn't do well. So no, definitely have not been a natural leader. I found leadership to be very challenging in high school. And I think it's something that you can learn better with time. And again, this is where growth mentality comes in. It's okay to fail as a leader, to not do a very good job, because everyone's going to have failures. Everyone's going to have setbacks. Setbacks are everywhere. And in Ally, we try our best not to have mistakes. And then with William Mann, we made a giant mistake. So the important thing is to put yourselves into positions where you are being challenged, where you are outside of your comfort zone. And when you fail, to see that as an opportunity to grow. And you will find that you will become a better and better leader as a result.
Thank you. I think that makes a lot of us feel a lot better about ourselves. And speaking of advice and encouragement, what additional advice and encouragement would you give us regarding starting our own club or nonprofit organization?
Yeah, I would say in terms of encouragement, do it. As I've shared earlier, that was the main thing that was holding me back from Ally, was I just thought I wouldn't do a good job. And I thought I couldn't do it. And, I had very special people behind me who encouraged me, who pushed me to go for it. And luckily I did. And now Ally was born. So, I think you should do it. If it goes well, then you've built an amazing organization and you've contributed to your community. And if you fail, that's okay, because that's how you're going to learn. In fact, back in my senior year of high school, I was the captain of my water polo team. But I wasn't made captain because I had a lot of leadership qualities. I wasn't very good at public speaking back then. I was just made captain because I was pretty good at water polo and I was friends with the people on my team. And I think I really failed. We didn't have a very good season. We lost a lot of games. We didn't have a lot of team cohesion. And a lot of it was because I lacked confidence as a leader. But I was able to learn from that. I was able to get motivation from that, to grow from that. And so, yeah, if you have an idea, go for it. In terms of additional advice for starting your own club, I think a good one is to involve as many other people as possible. I think Ronald Reagan had something on his desk when he was president, and it said, you will become a good leader when you stop worrying about who gets credit. And I think that's very true. When I first started Ally, I did worry about who got credit. I wanted all the credit. I remember we had a debate that we organized among the 3 people who were running for mayor for Irvine that year. We had them come in and speak, and I wanted to be the moderator. I wanted to be in front of everyone, to be the one asking the questions, keeping the time, and yeah, to get that attention. But my mom actually explained to me in that case, thanks mom, that no, you should try, you as a good leader, you should be trying to hand out credit as much as you can, because first of all, as a leader, you don't have time to worry about all the details. You don't have time to both time keep and make sure everything's going well, make sure there's enough seats, make sure the questions are being asked. You don't have time to manage all of that. And number 2, you can only motivate people when you give them the credit they deserve. And so for that debate, I ended up just taking a back seat, and we picked student board members to be the moderators. We picked people to keep time. We picked people to run the sign-in table. And I just sat back and watched, and that ended up being one of our best events ever because everybody was motivated. We were activating all the amazing talents that was in Ally. And so, yeah, as a young leader who's starting something new, try to have a good team and try to involve as many different people as possible and to give them the credit they deserve.
Thank you. And on the other hand, I think some of us are still trying to find what we actually want to do. So what are some tips that you would give to students who are still trying to find their passions?
Yeah, this is a very good question. I think probably the best thing you can do is to just go out there and try. Yeah, you'll learn more and more about what your passions are with time. And the reason time helps is because time gives you the opportunity to try different things and realize what you liked and what you didn't like and why. I was able to realize with time that I am someone who has a short attention span. I cannot just sit still and read for a long time or write for a long time or think about one issue for a long time. And it was a sad realization because there's a lot of things that I really wanted to be a writer and I really wanted to be a professor. And those are all things that require you to sit and think about issues for a long time. But I just can't do it. And that shut off a lot of doors for me. But the good thing is when some doors are shut, other doors open because you start realizing those are the things that really fit well. So now I know that I really benefit when I'm in a position where I can be creative with my work. I can contribute my own unique talents, and I get to work with people. And those are things that I only was able to realize through experiences that I didn't like. So I would suggest trying a lot of different things. And one thing that could save you time is to ask other people who've done it before, right? If you're considering an internship that really interests you, ask somebody who had that internship before and ask them what it was like. You know, were they able to work with different people? Were they able to have a say in what direction their work took? What was a day in their life like, et cetera. And these will give you a better idea to make your decisions.
I absolutely agree.
One more thing, Anna, I'm going to turn off my video for 30 seconds so I can plug in my laptop, but I'm still going to be here.
Okay, so while Oliver turns off his camera to charge his computer, we are going to transition to our next question. Ally has progressed from a small program that Asian parents don't take seriously to a multi-branches program. What do you think is the reason why people changed their minds and started attending this program? Oliver, whenever you're ready.
1 sec. Okay. I am all plugged in. Cool. All right. I wouldn't say it's that people didn't take us seriously or change their mind. I think something we've always had to fight within Ally is people, especially Asian Americans, thinking STEM is more important. Because we have our meetings on Saturdays, and as many of you might know, Saturdays are a great day for SAT prep, as well as for math camp and taking competitive math classes. Anna seems like that was a very familiar experience. So that was something that we had to show Asian parents, is that learning more about politics and civil rights and public speaking and these social/leadership skills is worthwhile, even when you compare it with things like computer science or math. I think it was able to change over time. I think it was just kind of word of mouth. That was the most effective thing for us. People would come to meetings and see the energy that the students have, and see that, you know, they're kind of there with all their friends, talking about issues that they found really interesting, with the opportunity to stand up and to practice speaking and to practice leadership. It's just a room with a lot of energy. And when people showed up to that space, they started realizing, hey, like, this is something that I want to take my kids to, or that I would want to tell my friends about. And so slowly we were able to grow from that. The second president of Ally in Irvine, after I was president, his name is Jerry. He's an amazing leader that joined Ally as a 8th grader, took over several of the board positions, became president, and now he's a freshman at Yale. His parents never supported him coming to Ally for the longest time. His dad refused to drive him to meetings, so he had to walk there himself, or sometimes he would be able to talk his mom into driving him. But a lot of the times he had to walk to meetings, but he just came every day or every week because he really enjoyed it. It was something that he was really interested by. And then that summer when he was president, we organized a debate among the candidates running for Congress in Irvine, including Katie Porter, who's our current member of Congress. And Jerry, because he was president, he was one of the moderators. And so he got to ask questions and make sure the event was going well. Well, that event his dad came to, and it was the first Ally event his dad came to. And his dad was floored. I mean, he was so proud of Jerry. I could see him sitting in the back, taking pictures and videos the whole time. And weeks later, he would show people those pictures with the members of Congress and point to Jerry and say, "That's my son." That's how proud he was. And after that, Jerry didn't have to walk to meetings anymore, but it definitely took a long time.
That's amazing to hear. And I myself also definitely had to overcome a lot of the Chinese stereotype. But our next question is, how did you determine that you were going to study history and politics? What prompted you to do so? And I think this also has to do with finding your passion and what you like to do.
Yeah. I did competitive math since I was like 4 years old, because that was what my mom did growing up. And I hated it. I was pretty good at competitive math, not very good, but certainly better than like your average non-math student. But I dreaded going to class every Saturday. And my mom growing up, my mom also beat me a lot, and I felt like I didn't have a lot of agency over my own life. And that all changed when I started high school and I became too big for my mom to beat. And when that happened, I told her, you know, when you had authority over me, you messed up and you beat me when you shouldn't have. So now that I'm too big for you to beat, I'm going to reject your authority altogether. And so from that point on, if my mom told me to do something and I think it makes sense, then I'll do it. But if she told me to do something and I don't think it makes sense, I'm just not going to do it. And so what I studied was one of these things. She always tried to talk me into studying computer science so I can be an engineer or be a doctor. And she was always disappointed. I picked history and I picked political science because that was what I loved and that was what I wanted to wake up every day reading about and learning about. And I would never, if I got to live a million times, I would never change this part. I got to study what I love. And I got to go to class every day in college, excited to go to class, excited to do my readings. And I know so many people in college, so many, I would say more than half of people in college are pressured to study something that they don't enjoy. And as a result, they suffer in college. They dread going to class. They don't do their readings. They don't do their homework. They don't do well on exams. That makes them depressed. That makes them do even worse on their exams, etc. You know, you only get to live through college once, you know. So why would you spend those 4 years of your life that you're never going to get back doing something that makes you miserable? So yeah, I think I had some privilege in terms of being able to make my own decisions because I rejected my mom's authority. But yeah, I would encourage all of you guys to do what makes you happy, because when you do what makes you happy, you're going to do better. You're going to be the best in the world at that thing. Whereas if you do something that makes other people happy, that other people are pushing you into, and you hate it, you're never going to be more than average because you don't have the motivation.
Thank you. I can definitely relate to you about not liking math. And everyone, this is your chance to use Oliver's advice to do what you actually like. Okay, and this is the end of our Q&A session. Oliver, the more you tell us about your experiences, the more amazing we all find you and Ally. And unfortunately, time flew by and we're already at the end of our seminar. We did not have time to have an audience question session, but if you would like, feel free to stay after and chat. You can either speak up or just drop your questions in the chat. If not, thank you all so much for joining the AEC Leadership Special with Oliver. I hope you learned just as much as I did from Oliver and is now also inspired to take the initiative and change the world. It was so nice to talk to you, Oliver, and all of our audiences. Thank you again and have a wonderful rest of your night.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and if you have any questions right now, you can just like talk or drop your questions in the chat. Thank you.
你好，可以提一个问题吗？
Yes, 可以。
刚才您的演讲中，然后第4个问题我印象非常深刻，尤其是您在谈论那个特朗普问题的时候，您讲了一个自己的小故事。然后我有一个问题，就是除了您的专业以外，您有没有在日常生活中有其他的爱好，或者是产生过心流？
Wait, Oliver, do you understand Chinese, right?
Hey, 听得懂. Yeah, not very good at speaking, but I can understand.
Okay. Also, if you need, I can like translate for Miss Zhao.
Yeah. So I do have other passions. I really enjoyed writing. I wrote 2 novels when I was in high school. They're not very good, so please don't read them. But I enjoyed writing them. And in my spare time, I play water polo still. I enjoy going to the gym. Yeah, I'm sorry. Did that answer your question?
Miss Zhao, 你需要我帮你翻译一下吗？
不用，可以的。
Okay.
然后第2个问题，我想问一下，就今天来讲，从你出生到今天来讲，你最感恩的一个人是谁？是你的母亲吗？
Yeah, absolutely. It has to be my mom. We had a really bad relationship growing up. There was a time when she would beat me every single day, and when I was in middle school, I got big enough to the point that we would just be able to have fights with each other, and no one would really come out on top. And as I'm sure you know, it's a lot of screaming, a lot of yelling, a lot of hurt emotions. Um, and then in college, in high school, I was able to have more independence, and I felt like that was really good for me, to be able to, kind of like what I explained in one of my stories earlier, to have agency over my own choices, to feel like if something went well, I was the only one who got the credit. And if something went poorly, I got all the blame. And that made me a lot more motivated to do successfully in high school. And after a few years, my mom and I became friends. We stopped being the traditional kind of teacher-student relationship that many Asian people have with their parents. And now my mom is my best friend. I call her probably 3 or 4 times every week. And yeah, we talk about politics, we talk about people, we talk about dreams and experiences. Yeah, she's definitely my best friend, and she's always had my best interest at heart, to push me up, to give me good advice. So I'm yeah, definitely the most thankful is her, although as I've said, it hasn't always been smooth.
你非常幸运，你有一个非常非常厉害的超级心理学的妈妈。
Yeah, she's amazing. Anna, I see a question from Carrie, I think in the chat.
Thank you, Miss Gel, for your question. So Carrie's question is, how would you draw the line between stepping back and helping your board members on their projects?
Yeah, I think there's a easy line to draw here. It's, think about if this thing went poorly, is it going to result in permanent damage for your organization? If it's something that will result in permanent damage, then you want to get more involved and supervise and make sure everything goes well. If it's not going to result in permanent damage, step back and let your board member have their own go at it, because they're going to do a lot better when they have their own agency and when they are able to be creative with it. So, for example, right, with Ally, if someone's organizing a speaker event, and they're in charge of inviting the speaker, and they're in charge of making sure people know it's the right date and time, etc. That's not something I'm going to get involved in, because if they fail, and let's say the speaker doesn't show up, or we didn't have a lot of audience members show up, that's okay. It happens. We've had speakers not come before, and we've survived as an organization. And I would rather my board member have the opportunity to try their best, and also to learn from that failure, than for me to get involved, because then we're not learning anything. Now, if one of my board members is submitting our paperwork to the California Attorney General's office so that we can still be registered as a nonprofit, then that's something that I'm going to get involved in, because if that's messed up, then Ally isn't going to be an organization anymore. So I think that's a very clear line.
Thank you. Okay, so next we have a question from Rosa. May I ask what is, she said, okay, what is the most important element that makes you be received? Wait, okay, I think she meant like, what is the most important element that you have that got you into Harvard? I'm not sure if that's what she meant.
Rosa, was that generally the right interpretation?
抱歉，我可以说中文吗？
可以，没问题。
就是我想问的是，就是因为一般像哈佛大学是特别难申请的大学，然后像在你身上肯定也有一些比较就是突出的地方，然后所以说也能被哈佛大学所录取。然后我想要了解一下，就是你认为就比较就是比较能够吸引哈佛大学的一些特征，或者说不管是学业成就啊，还是说就比如说社会上，或者说你个人的性格上的一些特征。 对，谢谢谢谢。
Great. I think there isn't a simple answer for this question. There is no one way to get into a great college or a great law school. I think, in fact, there's probably thousands or hundreds of thousands of different ways. They're just, yeah, I think these top universities, they're looking for someone, there's not anything specific they're looking for. I mean, you can get there with good grades or good test scores. You can get there by making a big difference in something you really care about. You can get there by being great at sports, etc. There's so many different ways to get there. Yeah, yeah, it's a tricky question, but I appreciate you asking. I think for me personally, it was I had pretty good test scores and grades, and then I think through Ally, I was able to show that that there were things in the community that I really cared about, that I had the confidence and the perseverance and the patience to work on that and to try to make a difference. But I would say the best thing you can do for you or for your kid is encourage them to do what makes them happy, to do what really motivates them, and to give them the tools they need to succeed in that. Because, you know, like in my case, I didn't like math. If my mom had kept pushing me to study math, I would not make a very good doctor or engineer. And I don't even know if I would have gotten into any schools for them. But luckily, I had the freedom to explore history and political science, which I loved. And as a result, I thrived in college and I had really good grades, and I didn't have too many mental health issues in college. And so that put me in a good foundation to then apply for Harvard.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we have next question is from Derek. What are your strategies when there are major disagreements during collaboration?
Yeah. Let me think. I think a story might be good here. I think it depends on the type of disagreement. I think what's always helpful is to take a pause and to think about who is involved and whether everybody who's involved there should be involved. In law school, I'm part of a organization called the Harvard Legal Aid Bureau, and we provide legal representation to low-income people in Boston. I thought it would mostly be legal work where I'll be speaking in front of a judge or doing a lot of legal research and writing, but actually a lot of the work we do is negotiating with these other attorneys. And the first time that I negotiated, I was really nervous because this other attorney, Attorney Krems, had been a lawyer for 20 years before I was born. He was a lawyer. And I was afraid he was just going to walk all over me and take advantage of my youth and inexperience. And so when we got into the negotiating room, I wasn't ready to compromise. It definitely got heated right away, to the point where he said, well, I'm okay taking it to trial and just not negotiating because we are going to win. And then I said, well, I'm also okay not negotiating because I think we're going to win. And we both walked ourselves into a corner where we pretended like we would rather go to trial than negotiate. And then neither of us wanted to walk back from that corner. And so negotiations just ended in like 7 minutes and we didn't get anywhere. Obviously, that doesn't work because in truth, neither of us wanted to go to trial. We both wanted to negotiate. So a week later, we met again. And this time I had thought about my strategy and why it didn't work. And I came out apologizing and saying that he was very gracious to me, which he was. I appreciated, for example, that he didn't interrupt me that last time we negotiated, that he treated me with respect. And that second time we started off on a much better footing and we ended up being able to settle that case. So I think, yeah, when there's a major disagreement, typically they're not disagreements over value, they're disagreements over positions. So just take a step back, take a breather, maybe involve different parties or involve someone else that wasn't involved before, and then see if you can move forward from that.
Great. Thank you, Derek, for the question. And then I think Melinda had a question.
Yeah, so I have two questions. My first one is, so I live in Michigan and I saw there was like no chapters here. How can I like get involved in the Ally program?
Oh, well, we are always looking for people to start new chapters. So yes, our closest chapter to Michigan, I think, would probably be in Texas, and that's pretty far. Um, why don't I chat you my email and then we can talk about this more?
Okay, yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
I'll do that.
And did you have a second question, I think? Or is that it?
My second question, I was actually gonna ask like, how do you start up a chapter?
Oh,
Yeah, thank you.
okay. So I think Carrie had another question. Okay, so I think what would you say was your most effective marketing strategy for getting more members and speakers during the initial stages of Ally?
For I think it was uh, to get community members who believed in our mission to help. When we first started Ally, we had just so many people who were well connected within the community, who understood our mission, who was really motivated by our mission, who offered to help however they can. We had Catherine Leo, who was a professor at UCI, and she would send out information about our meetings to the entire UCI community through their listserv. We had Melissa Fox, who was a city commissioner in Irvine, who introduced us to John Chiang, the California State Treasurer, so he can come in and speak. I think it is hard to have a marketing strategy when you're first starting out as an org and no one knows about you. So yeah, explaining to people within the community your mission and inspiring them and asking them to help is probably the most effective thing for me.
I hope that answered your question, Carrie. And then we have another question from Diane. Lots of pressure and depression in good colleges. How do you handle the situation?
Yeah, Diane, I'm so glad you asked this question. I think for Asian Americans, this is a particularly important question to ask because a lot of our parents don't have experiences with mental health and with mental health issues, or believe that mental health issues exist. And that's actually something that really hurts our kids. A statistic that scares me every time I read it is out of the last 11 people to commit suicide at Harvard, 7 of them were Asian Americans. So that's a lot more than half when only about 20% of Harvard is Asian Americans. So why are Asian Americans committing suicide at such a high rate in Harvard and all sorts of schools? Part of it is our parents don't think it's an important issue. Our parents are not willing to support them. And this is really sad because for other people, parents are typically the first people they turn to for support, for guidance, for advice when they have mental health issues. But with Asian Americans, I know a lot of my friends would never tell their parents just because they feel like they're going to have to defend themselves and they have to explain to their parents what they're like, why this is an important issue. And when you feel depressed or when you're really anxious, you don't have the energy to do that. And so people don't have that support. And that makes things worse for them. How to handle this situation? I also had a period in college where I was depressed. It was for about a 3-month period, and it was awful. I would just wake up every morning and immediately want to go back to sleep. All I wanted to do was just to sleep and sleep and sleep. I wish I could just sleep for 2 weeks and then wake up 2 weeks later, because that was how much pain I was in just from being awake and just from existing. And the only thing that made me feel marginally better back then was spending time with friends, doing sports like playing water polo, but those were all really temporary. I mean, it would be like 1 or 2 hours. One thing that always really helped was drinking, but that's not a cycle you want to get into where you start associating alcohol with and depending on alcohol to improve your mental health. So yeah, that's definitely not a good habit to get into. I think this is a difficult question, and I don't feel like I personally have the experience or the training to give a perfect answer. I think what does help though is, yeah, the having a therapist and taking medicine. There's a lot of stigma, especially among Asian Americans, that if you have a therapist, something's wrong with you. If you take medicine for mental health issues, something is wrong with you. That was a stigma I carried into law school. And in law school, as I told you earlier, I'm in the Harvard Legal Aid Bureau, which is it's the oldest student-run clinic in the United States. And it had a lot of great alumni, from Michelle Obama to Supreme Court justices. And when I first joined HLAB, the president was this woman called Kia. And she was someone I really looked up to. She's an amazing advocate, such a good leader, so good at speaking. She was someone I looked up to in every regard. And she's a woman who would, I would say, be a future president or be a future Supreme Court justice. And she told me she thinks everyone should have a therapist, not just people who are depressed. She thinks everyone should have a therapist because life has a lot of ups and downs, and it's stressful. And having someone with the professional training to help you navigate that saves you a lot of mental energy. I don't have a therapist, but honestly, maybe I should. And so I think the best advice is to try therapy, take medicine, and try to fight the stigma that surrounds those two things.
Thank you. It's getting kind of late, so I think we'll take one more question. Here, thanks. Okay, so we'll take one more question, and that's it. So if you have a question, you can type in the chat or speak up. And if not, then we are done for the day. No?
Do you know where we can get the recorded video? I'd like to actually share with my son. I'd like him to watch it afterwards.
Yeah, I think if you have contact with Miss Jung, she can actually, no, it will be on the AEC website, I think. And if you can't find it, you can contact Miss Jung or the Perceivers or the AEC, the AECglobal.org. Yeah.
ACEglobal.org. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's in the chat.
AEC. Oh, okay. Great. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, if we don't have any questions, then okay, I think we'll end here. Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you, Oliver. Your advice really means a lot to me, and I'm sure